Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our Metadata.io webinar today. Execution Past Click-Through Rate, How to Get from Vanity Metrics to Pipeline Impact with B2B Ads. My name's Colin White, and I'll be the Master of Ceremonies here today. We're very pleased today to be joined by Jessie Johnson. She's a research analyst from SiriusDecisions, and she'll be giving a good chunk of the presentation. Thanks for joining us today, Jessie.
Thank you, Colin.
Also on the line, we've got Gil Allouche. He's the co-founder and CEO of Metadata.io, and he'll be giving a piece of the presentation as well. Thanks for joining us, Gil.
Thank you, Colin.
So before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items, as usual. First of all, we are recording today's presentation, and for those of you on the line, we will be sending you a link to the recording within about 24 hours or so after the presentation. Also, we'll be taking questions and answers to the presenters at the end of the presentation. So as not to interrupt the flow of the presentation, we'll be taking all questions at the end, but feel free to enter your questions at any time into the GoToWebinar question and answer box, which should be on your console, and we will answer them all at the end of the presentation. So Jessie Johnson's going to start our presentation today. I'd like to hand it over to Jessie.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. What we'll cover is thinking about what's going on when it comes to B2B advertising. What are some of the challenges that marketers are faced with, and what are some of the expectations of the buyer? So as we know, we're starting to see kind of some declining performance when it comes to what are those traditional outbound tactics that we used to use to reach the buyers, and combined with their expectations for a more personalized and relevant and in-the-moment experience, where does that leave B2B marketers? So as we think about the evolution of all of these different advertising formats, the technologies, the capabilities that are supporting those formats and allowing us to really target and engage the right buyer, how do we know what's working and what some of those other opportunity areas may be that we might be leaving on the table? So today what you'll walk away with is, first of all, a diagnostic map to examine all of the different opportunities for optimizing your digital advertising performance. So whether that's identification of a pain point or even that thought, maybe there's a little bit something more that we could be doing here. And then taking a look at how do we really make sure that those digital advertising tactics are optimized and supporting our broader objectives for demand creation. And then from an operations perspective, how do we make sure that we have our processes streamlined and automated so that we're not only optimizing our investment in advertising at scale, but we're able to test those variables and really make an impact with the buyers that we're trying to reach? So as we think about digital advertising specific to B2B, what are some of the primary use cases that we see there? And the first is certainly reach. So how do we drive awareness for the brand? How many buyers, existing customers, and industry influencers can we reach with our advertising? So the goal there is really to be seen by the most number of people as possible. From a retargeting perspective, so this is when certain behaviors are exhibited, such as somebody performing a site search, and then we want to use our cookies in this instance to retarget those unknown buyers and bring them back to the website that was previously visited, and to get them to maybe identify themselves or start to participate in bi-directional communication with the brand itself. Web conversion optimization. So we think about getting that click from an advertising perspective. What happens when they land on the website or on the landing page? So web conversion optimization is all about helping to engage and qualify that visitor once they've arrived on that web property post-click. So the key point here is really driving traffic, the right traffic, to the website that we've already spent money on to make sure that they convert once they get there. And then there's lookalike modeling. So this is most effective when used to identify unknown audiences that have similar attributes to current customers. So this is all about finding new people to target that look just like that ideal customer profile. And lastly, we see ad tech used as part of our lead nurturing program. So thinking about integrating all of those different touch points into that nurture effort. And by leveraging your first-party data, you can target or suppress individuals that you don't want to reach out to because they are active already in the buying process. So today we'll focus on reach, retargeting, and lookalike modeling. And how do we as advertisers know what works? And so certainly marketers really need to measure all classes of ad tactic performance in order to identify those areas that can be improved by testing and optimization and understanding the impact on demand creation health overall as a result of some of those changes or modifications. And so as we think about what are some of the key metrics that really matter, and we've boiled those down into three main classes as it relates to digital advertising. And the first is all about advertising itself. So thinking about metrics such as impressions, CPM, clicks, or even cost per click. So if we think about what we do with these measurements from a metric class perspective, we think about these as being activity-based metrics. So they really serve to quantify what has been done. And so if we think about from a metric class perspective, even the metric for impressions, as an example, could also be categorized as a readiness class. Are we able to reach the amount of audience members that we need to reach in order to get them engaged? From a website perspective, that's all about visits, bounce rates, time on site, and even form conversion rates. So this is all about what people are doing once they land on that web property after they've clicked through the ad. So measuring conversion here really allows marketers to understand that top of funnel impact and things like, do we have the right message against the right target audience, the right offer? Are they able to convert to find what they need, or that promise that was made in the ad, is that reflected then on that landing page after they've clicked? And then from a waterfall perspective, this is all about thinking about the different stages of the waterfall. So taking a look at metrics such as marketing qualified leads or sales qualified leads, and even closed won business. So similar to conversions in the website category, we would think of MQLs and SQLs as really being the output. So MQLs and SQLs are the output of all of that activity that we've generated as a result of our advertising and our web conversion optimization techniques. And so in order to really optimize upstream advertising and website performance, waterfall metrics should be utilized to give visibility into what that true output and impact performance is to the business as it relates to digital advertising. And so if we think about these metrics in terms of each of these four classes, so as it relates to measuring ad tactic performance specifically and understanding what works and what doesn't, and where testing and experimentation can have the most impact on overall program performance. So 4 key metric classes to consider as it relates to advertising performance. And again, activity metrics really being the quantification of the actions taken. So those are the counts of our actions. Output measurements measure the direct results of that activity. So how many inquiries are we generating as a result of all of those clicks? And impact is ultimately the effect of the output against business goals. And then from a readiness perspective, that green bucket on the bottom there, how prepared is the organization to perform? So this might serve as an indicator of why things are happening when we start to get into our diagnostics and testing and optimization processes. And so this is just a quick view into all of the different components, the different attributes, the movement that we need to understand at any given point in time as it relates to ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. So if we look at this dashboard here, we're thinking about impressions. So from that readiness perspective, again, how many people are we going to reach? Once we start to engage them, how many clicks are we going to see? And how many of those clicks actually become leads? Where do they progress to from there. So not only the need to keep in mind everything that we can do to truly optimize that program against its intended audience and even some of the goals and objectives that we've set, but keeping in mind the need to continuously monitor that progress. How are we visualizing that activity, and how are we sharing that within the organization, whether that's an executive level view or even more at the tactic level, so the people who are responsible for placing the advertising and making sure that we're hitting our numbers from an impressions and clicks standpoint. So what story are we telling as it relates to data, whether that's pipeline attribution or even the ability to go in and test and optimize some of the components within that advertising mix. So making sure that we're able to tell that story in real time as we need to. And so how do we optimize our digital advertising investments? There's so many variables that come into play as it relates to the audience itself, the targeting, the channels that we're using, and even the offers that we're presenting via those channels. So how do we best approach this opportunity to really diagnose and optimize everything that we have in market from a program and tactics perspective? And so this is our program and tactics diagnostics map. So thinking about those opportunity areas, the first thing is to really identify and define what that opportunity is. So here we determine where that change might have the greatest impact and whether we need to focus in at the program or tactic level. From there, we start to think about why are we seeing some of the trends or some of the activities that we're starting to see at that program or tactic level. So here we want to start to evaluate and articulate that hypothesis that we're going to test against and consider all of the different courses of action that could possibly improve performance. And at that stage, we start to gather evidence. So how can we prove our hypothesis? And ultimately, we're prioritizing the actions that we want to take based on a view of impact versus ease of implementation. And finally, we've determined how we want to take action. And so we consider the setup of a test case that will allow us to see the impact of those changes versus a control group where things are really left the same. And then once we agree on the runtime that's necessary to accurately assess the impact of those changes, then it's time to put our test to work. And so when it comes to digital advertising, there's certainly so many variables that could be tested, and even more so many things that could potentially kind of, trigger that testing process. And so what could some of those common problems be? Maybe it's a low click-through rate or a low conversion rate or simply a lack of impressions. So in order to address those problems with digital advertising performance, we really recommend looking at those issues in terms of categories, which will also help inform our potential approaches for optimization. And the first that we take a look at is targeting. So common problems certainly include reach or even profile fit. And this is typically diagnosed by not having enough impressions at the top of the funnel to drive the right amount of website traffic or even funnel performance, or by identifying that we have incorrectly profiled that ideal visitor for the website from the start, or they're just not converting once they get on the site. So they've clicked through the ad, but there's something on the site that's keeping them from converting. The other bucket is media performance. So thinking about all of the different components that come along with the media itself and or the landing page. So maybe that's not being engaged with, or we're starting to see a drop off or an abandon rate during form completion. These issues are typically diagnosed via low click-through rate, and then also time on site or the number of pages per visit, as well as bounce rates and form abandon rates. And then funnel performance. So the last bucket here, common problems that we see are things like slow velocity through the demand waterfall, poor lead quality, thinking about quantity over quality of leads, And so these issues themselves are really diagnosed through waterfall metrics. So the metrics that we would be looking at here is showing that leads are perhaps aging well past average velocity baselines. If we think about the time it takes for leads to convert from stage to stage within the demand waterfall. But once we've started to take a look at these foundational elements, so thinking about targeting, media performance, and funnel performance, at that point, we can start to consider additional optimization approaches in order to improve our digital advertising performance and, by extension, our program and tactic level performance overall. So the first one we'll look at is targeting. So typically, we take a look at three things here. So impressions, bounce rates, visits, conversions. What is that activity on the site itself? So if we think about a common indicator for targeting issues is really that lack of impressions at the top of the funnel. Another indicator similar to impressions is visits. So a lack of visits could also indicate an issue with targeting itself. And a lack of visits from digital media could be due to poor targeting upstream that causes media downstream to be irrelevant. And so really, if we think about that visits dynamic, the key is to take a look at visits and click-through rates in terms of targeting and how is that media performing once they land. And low conversions as well. So similar to the bounce rate, low conversions could indicate a targeting issue. So we're reaching out to the wrong buyer from the get-go, potentially with the wrong offer there as well. And so in order to offset those targeting issues, so thinking about some of those foundational elements, who are we targeting and what is the right offer for that audience member? So a couple of different approaches here. And the first is thinking about account-based targeting. So serving ads against a specific list of companies that we know we want to go after, in addition to lookalike modeling. So identifying the right fit audience based on attributes of those ideal customers that have already purchased. And keeping in mind when we think about this targeting piece, where are the personas that we're reaching out to? Where are they hanging out or spending their time online? What are some of those watering holes that we want to make sure that we have a presence in? From a partner performance perspective, are we engaging with the right partners? How are their sites performing? And even more importantly, how are their sites performing against our target audience? And then from a performance forecasting perspective, to make sure that we're really understanding how many impressions are required at the top of the funnel, extending our performance forecasting above the funnel using standard conversion rates for click-through and website conversion. So it's very similar to the reverse waterfall methodology to help during the media planning and impression estimation phases from an operational standpoint. And as an example, just to show this idea of account-based targeting in action. So a couple of action items to get started with this approach is first, certainly defining what is that target segment that we want to reach? And then what are those content and offers that are going to appeal to that target segment, and what capabilities do we have from a targeting perspective, both from our media partners as well as our vendors? And so account-based targeting really allows advertisers to serve those ads against that predetermined list of companies. So organizations that take this account-based targeting approach really should make sure that they have not only that specific target set of companies in hand, but also, again, thinking about almost segmenting out that content and those offers based on that target account list. And our next approach here, lookalike modeling. So thinking about using lookalike modeling to boost performance by targeting those individuals with similar attributes to known customers or qualified leads even. So this approach requires the ability to segment those high-value existing customers to develop the model itself, and then the ability to reach them through our advertising. So some things to take a look at if we want to go down this path of lookalike modeling is, first of all, to take a look at the data that you have, as well as any technology and data modeling capabilities that you have in-house that would be required to identify and model out what that ideal customer looks like, and then to match that from an ad targeting perspective. And then to continuously test for a lift in conversion effectiveness and inquiry quality. So starting to really focus on that idea of quality over quantity of audience members reached. And then from a media performance perspective, so thinking about this other bucket, and again, some flags that might show that we have an issue with the media itself. So, maybe it's a low click-through rate, or once people do arrive at the site, they're just not engaging with the content that's there. We're starting to see a high bounce rate, and even thinking about that ratio of inquiry to conversion on the site, we're just seeing that that's kind of low, and visitors aren't really completing many of those inquiry forms that would initiate that process there. So a couple of different optimization approaches. So the core element of digital advertising really is the media, and it relies on the audience taking action initially, as well as ensuring that they continue to take action on the site itself post-click. So a couple of things to think about. First of all, is the media itself engaging the buyers? So do we have, is it an interactive approach? Are there features and functionality that we can use to engage that buyer? Maybe it's polls, quizzes, maybe it's the ability to share content or even the result of their quiz with their own followers and their own network. What is the ability or the opportunity for that buyer to come in and truly engage with the content itself? And then from a website perspective, is the point of entry into the website from that ad click, is that validating or confirming why they're there? So is it consistent in terms of message and offer from the click to that website experience? And when we think about media, this is oftentimes, if we think about all of the different components or variables that we could test from an advertising perspective, certainly the notion of media performance is rich with variables that we can test, whether that's the creative itself, the copy, the offer, even placement. So thinking about from a creative and content perspective, how does it look? What does it say? Does it align with the preferences of the personas that we're actually reaching out to and trying to engage with this effort? And from a waterfall performance perspective, so again, thinking about, what are some of the signals that this might be an area of opportunity to diagnose for some areas that we can actually make changes in and increase performance and progression from stage to stage throughout the waterfall. So key indicators is velocity, and also the overall number of conversions. So are people converting from stage to stage? And if so, how quickly does that take place? Or are we able to identify some stall points that we could potentially address there? So optimization approaches, number one is thinking about the ability to retarget those audiences that we're trying to engage. So thinking about past behavior on the site itself and retargeting that audience or that segment with kind of that next best message, next best piece of content. So if we think about sequencing content throughout that journey, or even in the context of a nurture program, what is the next best piece of content to serve up based on how that audience has interacted in the past on our website? And then from a nurture integration standpoint, making sure that retargeting isn't really kind of a siloed effort. It's truly integrated with a longer term multi-channel approach to a nurture program. And then thinking about, as we think about the waterfall, so other things to take a look at would even be things like if a lead has been rejected in the past or disqualified, what are some of those reasons that they may have been disqualified, and can we re-engage them with a retargeting effort? So how can we reactivate some of those leads that potentially have gone dormant in the past? And here's an example from one of our own efforts here, thinking about driving attendees to one of our events. And so from an action items perspective, again, thinking about when retargeting, the need to not only understand who we're reaching out to and what their past behaviors are, but what does their experience look like? So sequencing that content as it relates to that persona and the stage of their journey that they're in. And then also thinking about from a capability standpoint, what do we need to have in place in order to make this happen? So from a retargeting perspective, really thinking about cookies that can be utilized to segment and serve those ad units to those individuals according to their site or search behaviors to increase the odds of conversion once they do land on the site post-click. So prior to executing that retargeting program, again, the key piece is mapping that content to the buyer's persona and their journey stage, and then identifying where and when to serve up that content to that buyer throughout their journey. And so a key piece of that too is thinking about leveraging intent data to really serve that targeted content to the buyers that are already starting to exhibit signs that they are active and in market. And then the nurture integration piece. So again, thinking about from a nurture design perspective, nurture is so much more than email these days. So nurture is everything from, certainly email plays a role there, but that could be your chat experience on site as part of the nurture, or even thinking about the telefunction and that interplay of, say, digital and human touch points in the later stages of that journey, and even thinking about things like retargeting or your display campaigns as being part of this integrated approach to nurture. So certainly very effective there, really thinking about the role of advertising, not just filling the top of the funnel, but supporting other goals that we have as demand marketers to ensure that we're not only activating those leads, but we're also validating and accelerating those leads throughout their decision process. So there's a whole lot of variables up in the air when it comes to being a demand marketer this day and age. We need to understand not only our audience, but how we can package up and present those messages, those ads, the creative that's really going to resonate and motivate them to take action. And so next, Gil is going to walk through how can we solve for a lot of this complexity within this process when it comes to generating pipeline in B2B marketing, where our B2B buyers really do have those consumer-like expectations.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jessie. This was very, very interesting and very educational. With that, it's a perfect segue to really think about some of the technologies that are available today to really automate and optimize this entire operation. And Jessie was talking about many different points that are very relevant. I'm going to talk to those points and particularly how technology can solve for this. So I'm going to start with the beginning. Why are we doing this to begin with? And that's because generating pipeline in the B2B world is becoming increasingly difficult. There are so many different technologies that you have to manage on a day-to-day basis in order to just make it tick to begin with, not even optimize. You have to use your marketing automation, and you have to use many different data sources and buy some data and push it into your marketing automation and send emails. You have to upload those audiences of the different advertising channels like Facebook, LinkedIn. There are challenges with that because many people sign up with their personal email versus the corporate email. The match rates sometimes are low. There's the UTM tag that you have to deal with to make attribution work in an accurate fashion. And so what ends up being the case is that your team or yourself are spending all your day in technical, mundane, repetitive tasks, which takes away from your time to actually do some optimization. You don't have time to sit down, take a step back and say like, okay, what's working, what's not? How is my digital marketing mix working? And so over time, you see those diminishing returns, the statistical we see across the web with different B2B companies, and exactly what the kind of challenge that Jessie was referring to. And so what if marketing could run on autopilot? What if it was possible to connect all of the different marketing technologies you're already invested in, including the data sources, including the advertising technology that you advertise on, including the CRM that you have, really the entire marketing stack, if you will, and connecting it into one kind of central piece of excellence, and that one will use all of the data within those technologies to understand what worked before, what should potentially work in the past, and then use APIs to execute campaigns via those channels in a scale that was not seen before. Meaning, instead of running 10 campaigns, 20 campaigns, and trying to figure out if they're working or not, you can run 500 campaigns, 1,000 campaigns with the same personnel. By doing that, you end up going through so many different combinations of, and Jessie was talking about that before, all the different variables that you need to do in marketing, in advertising. You have the audience you're going after, you have the copy, you have the creative, the channel, the campaign type. Is it going to be a sponsored content, or is it going to be a display ad? Is it going to be LinkedIn or Facebook? Are we going to promote this webinar, or are we going to promote this white paper? Is it going to be to the C-level executives or director level? There are so many variables to play with. Multivariate experimentation allows you to sift through hundreds to thousands of different experiments and hone in on the ones that are generating pipeline. Yes, it's important to take a look at impressions and clicks. It's even very important to take a look at the leads, but it's more interesting to see which ones of those leads ended up as an MQL, an SQL, and an opportunity. And based on that, you can go back and tell the AI or the solution that you're using, oh, okay, out of the 1,000 campaigns that we ran this month or 1,000 campaigns that we ran this quarter, those 50 have generated $20 million in opportunity. And so those are the ones we want to double down and triple down on. And by the way, last quarter, we already closed 5 million of the previous opportunities that were generated. So I can go and ask for more budget for my next advertising campaigns. And so having the ability to run those on autopilot will save you so much time so that you can focus on optimization, and using a system like Metadata, the execution of those campaigns at scale and optimization of them based on KPIs you care about is done automatically. So we're introducing account-based advertising for B2B marketers. What we think is an end-to-end solution to completely take care of your account-based advertising. And it can be used for many different tactics. It doesn't have to be only for top of the funnel. We work with companies, large companies like Nutanix and Aerospike and Sugar CRM and many others who are using metadata to run all of their campaigns, account-based marketing campaigns, sales acceleration campaigns, top of the funnel, competitive campaigns, buyer intent. There are so many different campaigns you can be running. The idea is to run it in an effective way so that you don't have to log in to those different channels in a manual fashion, upload audience, and run through all the technical mundane tasks that get you to run out of time. Some of the customers that we work with really rely on metadata today to scale. And that is because you don't have to keep adding personnel to your marketing team or to your agency in order to scale your operations. If you have a software that knows how to run all of those campaigns automatically on those channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, programmatic, retargeting, via an API, and there is an AI model that automatically takes the success KPIs, for example, leads generated, MQLs generated, pipeline generated, and brings it back to the experiment level and then eliminates it or quadruples the spend and creates more clones of it, then you have time to focus on creating content, creating strategy, and taking a look at your experiments from a very high level bird eye view versus being in the trenches of just running those technical repetitive operations. So as you can see here, we have all kinds of different B2Bs using our solution. Some of them are smaller ones who just need pipeline in an automated fashion, and then some of the large ones who want to run all of their marketing operations and advertising operations in such a productive way that allows them to reach optimization that they were not able to reach before. And so at the end of the day, what we do is generate pipeline by completely automating the process of account-based advertising, end-to-end, including buying the data, including segmenting that data and those audiences, previewing those audiences. Jessie was talking about, some of the bugs, if you will, in advertising is that you end up advertising to the wrong person. And that happens when you use lookalike modeling and some other tactics, because sometimes there are a black box. You upload a list of 10,000 companies or 10,000 contacts. You click on lookalike, you end up with an audience of 1 million people. You don't know exactly who those 1 million people are. With our solution, you can actually preview each and every one of the people and the companies before you spend your media budget on and before you spend your time on. And so we really take care of each and every one of the steps, and it's a closed loop, meaning the data flows all the way from Facebook to your marketing automation, to your lead form, and then all the way to Salesforce, and being audited to see what's been successful, what has not been successful, and based on that, augment those experiments and those campaigns. So let's take a look at some of those tasks that we're referring to that Metadata is completely eliminating and automating. Buying data, joining those lists together. What if you want to, one moment you want to buy a list of companies who are using your competing technology, but at another moment you want to join particular people from within the technology. You don't want to go after all the people within those companies who are using competing technology. What if you want to join lists and you want to understand, okay, how many people are using my competing technology, but also how many of them right now are in the market for my solution or product, because Bombora, Mintigo, or G2 Crowd are showing me some buyer intent signals. Being able to do a Venn diagram between all the data sources together is a competitive advantage. We're talking about low match rates. When you export a list of contacts from one of those data sources, many times you end up with corporate emails. Now, most people don't sign up to Facebook and not even LinkedIn sometimes with their corporate emails, which leads to very low match rates. You upload the list of 100,000 people to target, you end up with 15 or 20,000 of them. You can reach 60% if you really take advantage of all the data sources out there, and you run that contact list throughout all those data sources, and then enhancing your PII, essentially getting more and more personal email addresses, cookies, IP. And again, all those different keys allow you for much, much higher match rate on those channels. And of course, one of the most interesting pieces is the multivariate testing, really having the capability to run through all the possibly likely to succeed combinations of ads. Again, we're talking about the collateral and creative and copy and campaign and channel, so on and so forth, running all through those combinations until you find your what we call hidden gems. And of course, placing tags and pixels for tracking, automatically figuring out who's visiting your website based on IP reverse lookup. So even if someone came to your landing page or to your website and didn't convert, you can still get a notification. And of course, you automatically retarget them with more pieces of content. Lead enrichment. So when let's say you're targeting someone, the best persona that you can dream of, you're targeting them on Facebook, and they click on your ad and they start reading your ebook. Let's say that ad was a lead gen campaign that automatically populates your Facebook details within Facebook, so you don't have to be redirected to a different landing page. Likelihood that you sign up with your Gmail account to that particular social network like Facebook. And so if we push that Gmail address, even if it's the best lead, to your marketing automation, Jessie was referring to that before, you may end up with a very low lead score. And then your SDRs, your salespeople won't even follow up. But if you go and then reach that lead and turn that Gmail into a corporate email and then give the name and the job title, the company name and the industry and the technologies and all the rest of that information, plus the experiment information, and you push that into your marketing automation, then the likelihood is that you're going to be able to, first of all, score that lead much higher, and two, you'll be able to have all that information and know exactly whether that lead is a high quality lead or not. So really, these are all the technical tasks that we go through. There are many others that Metadata completely automates for you, so that you don't have to take care of all those mundane tasks and use a dozen different solutions to kind of put together this process. Metadata is an end-to-end solution that takes care of that. So a quick example can show you how many experiments you can quickly end up with, even if you don't have that many variables. So let's say you're just advertising on Facebook, LinkedIn, and programmatic, and let's assume that you only have 5 audiences, which is really not a lot of segments. 5 audiences is not really a big a big segmentation effort. We have about 50 here in Metadata. And then what's your offer type? Are you going to run a landing page campaign or a lead gen form? If you just use those two. And then how many creatives are you going to try? How many copies? And then how many assets are we talking about? Maybe a white paper, an ebook, and a webinar. If you just run those particular experiments, this is how your resources section on your website looks like. And this is not a big operation here. I would say an A-funded startup should have these many possibilities. You end up with more than 1,000 campaigns. What team or agency would be okay running 1,000 campaigns for you? Vast majority of people get very overwhelmed by that, and for a good reason, because you have to also keep track of all those different combinations and UTMs for all those different combinations, and how are they performing. You have to constantly pull data from your marketing automation and CRM to see which ones are performing, not just based on vanity metrics like impressions and clicks, but on actual KPIs like leads and QLs and pipelines. And so that's where a system that completely automates that experimentation engine, if you will, allows you to do that at scale so that you don't have to worry about the execution piece of it. You don't even have to worry about the optimization piece of it, but rather you can take a look at a bird's eye view and say, exactly, this is what's been working for me. This is the digital marketing mix that is optimized here. And these other 80% of the campaigns are not really performing. And so you can quickly sift through those experiments and understand what's working, what's not. And so, as we mentioned before, we work with all kinds of different organizations. However, we're 100% B2B focused, and we have a bunch of industries that play well with us. For example, B2B tech, cybersecurity, manufacturing, healthcare, financial services. Those are the ones that have been historically been very successful with Metadata. And that's because there is complex selling. It's not an easy sell. It's a very expensive, high ACV, so very expensive product. And so it's worthwhile finding those perfect combinations that lead to a very high ROI. When you end up with campaigns, let's say you run 10,000 campaigns for the year, you will find the 500 that are the best. By going through so many different experiments, you will find by nature the best combinations that will outperform your competition. And we see that with some of our customers, where we become a competitive advantage to them because we really provide them with that operation where they don't have to keep adding people to run those campaigns. They can use the same personnel, one system to execute and optimize. Just to give you a quick example, Nutanix, one of our customers, recently won an award for running the top tech-sponsored content. And so, again, these are things that come automatically and naturally just by running such a large number of campaigns. And so it's a natural kind of advancement that happens just by the nature of experimentation. And so together with Jessie, we're going to summarize really what is the key takeaways and recommendation of running a digital advertising play and how to do it in an effective manner with experimentation and data-driven methods so that you really know what's working, what's not. You pre-select the companies and the people that you advertise to, so there are no kind of unqualified leads, and that you optimize towards the KPIs that move the needle, which is pipeline impact. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jessie, who'll go through the key takeaways, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A.
All right, thanks, Gil. Yeah, so the main things to keep in mind is really when it comes to digital advertising, most organizations are already utilizing some form of a digital channel. But with the booming availability of digital advertising and all of the different formats to try, the different audiences to target, all of those different combinations of variables that we were just talking about, really we tend to see some ad hoc or disconnected campaigns that surface as a result of the all of this activity. So the key there is just to make sure that we're not disconnected, we're not functioning in silos, and nothing is going to get lost in the noise because we're targeting the right audience with the right offer and the right content. So really, where do we start with that? And it's, three main buckets. The first thing in terms of, what are these best practices to keep in mind as it relates to our audience and our goals for digital advertising channels? The first thing to keep in mind is measurement beyond the click. So analyzing digital advertising performance beyond those activity or vanity metrics. So thinking about an integrated approach to measuring digital ad spend, keeping in mind that downstream impact as it relates to the demand waterfall and the metrics that we're taking a look at there. So only by looking beyond that click can we truly understand the impact that we're making with our digital advertising dollars. The second key bucket there is to always keep in mind a methodology, a process, an approach to diagnosing some of those issues. So we talked a little bit earlier about starting to formulate a hypothesis. So things aren't performing the way that I want them to. What are some opportunities to make some adjustments and some changes? So making sure that there's always that approach to testing and diagnostics as part of our optimization strategies. And then also continuously auditing and improving some of those foundational elements that are already in place. So part of that is making sure that the tactics are being executed properly, but then also thinking about our audience. Are we still in line with audience preference? Are we active in the watering holes where our audience is active, as an example? And then also exploring additional optimization approaches into the future, just to make sure that we're continuously driving improvements in overall performance for each of those digital advertising tactics that we are using within the mix.
Okay, this is Colin coming back online here. So I think that just about concludes the presentation, and we're going to move into questions and answers. I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box. We've got a few that have come in, so let me start reading off a couple here. And I think some of these may have been covered later in the presentation, but let's read them out and see what you think, Jessie and Gil. First question that came in was, how can you find out where your targets are hanging out online? And I think this is more, but this is about intent data, or just in general where your targets are going to be best targeted for your advertising.
Yeah, I can take that one, Colin. So there are a few ways to find out where your targets are hanging out online. There are a few companies out there that that's all they do, and they focus on bubbling up those signals. Mintigo, for example, is one of those examples. Bombora, for example, LeadSift, G2 Crowd, and so you can use those data sources particularly, and they will be able to tell you, oh, these particular companies are currently in the market for maybe a load balancer, because we've noticed that they've been on articles about that particular topic, or they've been on G2 Crowd researching that topic. So there are ways to kind of find out those signals just by purchasing the data from those buyer intent data vendors. Another one is Aberdeen and Big Willow that will allow you, again, they have programmatic impression data, and so they can see if you're looking at a particular ad, or if you've been served an ad on a particular topic, or if you're on a particular website right now. And so they bubble up all those signals, they analyze them, and then it can give you some kind of a fit. It's not 100% accurate, but it's definitely a good signal that tells you, oh, this company is right now visiting a particular topic or even the market.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gil. We have a question that came in, I think, aimed more at Jessie here, and the question is, for a smaller organization, which optimization approach that you covered would be the best one for a small organization to start with?
I would say certainly thinking about that targeting piece, making sure that we're going after the right audience, so that if we are working with limited resources, they're very precisely targeted towards that audience that we want to engage. And behind that, I would actually pay attention to that post-click experience. So targeting the right audience with the right ad, but making sure that once they do click through, they have the experience that we intend for them to have on the website, and that we're minimizing all of those little nuances, such as maybe an extra form field that we're not going to do anything with that data point right away. So just thinking about that conversion path once they do post-click, so they arrive on the landing page or the website itself, making sure that there's not a whole lot of friction that's going to, kind of prevent them from taking that action that we do want them to take.
Okay, great. Next question. Are there resources out there for benchmarks for the cost of capturing B2B leads?
Oh yeah, that's actually a perfect segue. We're going to release in the next few weeks a benchmark report based on tens of thousands of, I think actually we ran more than tens of thousands of campaigns in 2018. And so we're going to release the benchmark report that shows the different cost per lead and cost per click and cost per impression and ratios and what channels are more successful, some examples of successful campaigns very soon. And it's all in the B2B space. So wait for that.
Okay, that sounds great. Another question that came in, are there any analytics tools that allow you to report on your advertising, website, and waterfall metrics all in one place?
Well, of course, Metadata is one of those solutions. That dashboard that Jessie was showing before is from the Metadata solution. When you log in, the first thing you see is how many people, how many companies you're targeting, how many people you're targeting, how much money did you spend, how many impressions, clicks, leads, NQLs, and then pipeline dollar you were able to generate. And you can click on it. It will directly drive the data from Salesforce and show you exactly what opportunities, what leads you were able to generate, so on and so forth. So that's Metadata. But to be objective, because we are on an educational webinar, there are many attribution-only tools. So Metadata execution tools also show you the attribution, but there are some attribution tools that are out there. Like, for example, there is Visible that is now part of Marketo. There is Datorama that is part of Salesforce. And there are a few other solutions as well. And so you can take a look at those, and you'll be able to go back and understand exactly your attribution from your advertising campaign.
Great. So here's kind of a nitty-gritty question. Which components of ads, and I think this was maybe speaking to that slide you had, Gil, talking about all the different the components of campaigns. Which components of ads or campaigns tend to have the biggest impact on performance?
That is a great question. Performance. So performance would be, I would say, the ad creative, ad text, and the audience. Those are the ones. If I had to choose out of those six, I would say those three are the ones that are usually impacting the most. You wouldn't believe the difference of using a blue background versus a black or a red background, or the difference between showing a larger thumbnail to a smaller one. So we definitely see big performance differences based on that. I was about to say channel and campaign type and offer type is also there, but that's mostly going to impact the velocity. So for example, if you're using a redirect landing page campaign, you may lose some people from Facebook or LinkedIn going into your landing page. So if you're using a lead gen campaign, you just reduce that friction significantly. Same thing goes for the differences between the Facebook and LinkedIn. Sometimes you'll find that you can get in one of the channels same exact quality of leads, but for half the price. And so really experimenting with all of them is what we think is the most successful strategy. We really do. And we see that, every day in our work. But if you had to choose and you do these things manually completely, yeah, add creative and the audience, and then of course, try a few copies.
Okay, and so once again, if you have any questions, enter them into the Q&A box. I think we have time for a couple more here. One that came in is, I think this is for Gil. How fast does the AI adjust campaigns? I guess based on that, with that closed loop solution, how fast does the AI actually figure out which campaigns are working better than others, and then kind of shift the budget towards the better performing ones?
Yeah, so it's a gradual process. Just like a human, the AI can't really observe all the data before it's there. And so if we're running, let's say you're running 1,000 campaigns, and then only 200 of those campaigns are pasting, only for those 200 campaigns that are pasting and generating impressions, the AI can say, okay, looks like out of the 1,000 campaigns, those 200 are successfully pasting properly. And then as they start generating clicks, it will start going through those clicks and say, oh, okay, this campaign is generating this click-through rate, and this campaign is generating this cost per click, so on and so forth. And so the longer you let the AI execute and optimize your campaign, the further down the funnel it will be able to optimize towards. Let's say your sales cycle is 2 months, and you let Metadata run all those campaigns and optimize those campaigns for 2 months. After 2 months, it will be able to, let's say you start generating some opportunities from those campaigns and leads. After that period of time, Metadata will be able to start looking way ahead and say, based on the past, this campaign is likely to generate this much pipeline, and we'll be able to start making decisions. And there's a whole decision tree and machine learning model that is using regression that is being used to make those decisions. Should I up the budget? Should I eliminate this campaign? Should I extend this campaign? Should I replace the audience? Should I replace the creative? Those decisions are being made by the AI on autopilot, or if you're more comfortable with it, they are being recommended as actions, and then you can approve or reject them.
Okay, so one or two more questions here. I think this one's a follow-up. Can you tell me the list of intent data tools again?
Yeah, of course. There is Mintigo, which we think is, we're partnered with them, and there is a particular buyer intent that they have that others don't. There is Bambora that have their tag on many different websites and can tell you which articles particular companies are reading. There's G2 Crowd. We see crazy good ROI from G2 Crowd. We're able to target companies who are visiting our category, who are interested in content execution and intelligence right when they visit. Literally, if you go and visit that page and you start doing some research, you'll see our ad follow you and an email from me probably within hours. And so those are the top. There's also LeadSift. There is Aberdeen and Big Willow, the same company. And so those are the main ones that we see in the market.
Okay, so that was Mintigo, Bambora, G2 Crowd, LeadSift, and then Aberdeen, Big Willow.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think we've just got one last question here, and I think this was a follow-up to the one about of the components of ads that tend to have the biggest impact on performance. And this one is there a particular digital ad platform that tends to perform best in the B2B space?
This is a loaded question. Yeah, it's a very loaded question because everyone always thinks in the B2B space that Facebook is not working, and Twitter may be working, and so LinkedIn. We really see that we see all those channels work. Of course, LinkedIn is a predominant B2B channel out there. The content there is 100% B2B, and so, or at least like 100% business, and so there's so much more context over there, and people are kind of ready for those interactions. But we do see other channels, as long as your custom audience is accurate, as long as you're not using like, Facebook 1 million lookalike audience, as long as you don't do those kind of tactics, and you've upgraded and you're using accurate targeting and you're using testing to constantly change your strategy, you can be successful in all of those channels, and you should run campaigns on all of those channels and find out which one you're generating similar quality and for a better price. And so we see that all the time. By running all of those thousands of experiments, we will find out that you can get a lead instead of for $150 for $110, and therefore you can generate so many more leads, and the velocity can be so much higher just because you made that arbitrage between the channels. So theoretically LinkedIn, practically, if you use experimentation, the experimentation will tell you for your particular persona and company who and where you're going to get your most ROI.
Okay, great. Well, we're just about hitting the top of the hour, and I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for this webinar about getting past click-through rate. It's been a very engaging presentation. Thank you very much, Jessie Johnson from SiriusDecisions, for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And thank you, Gil. As I mentioned, we'll be sending the recording of this webinar out within the next 24 hours, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Metadata.io webinar. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys.